actually discusses movies. Be aware that it may discuss any of the following elements: endings, surprise twists, unexpected cameos, and all manner of spoilers. If this doesn't appeal to you, why listen to a movie podcast? Without further ado, please enjoy our feature presentation, The Shameless Picture Show.
Hello and welcome to another episode of The Shameless Picture Show. I am Michael Viers, and I'm just jumping in here to give you guys an update of what's going on with this episode. Originally, we being Nick and I, had planned to do Apocalypse Now for our next episode. It's recorded, I started editing it and everything, but I got a really interesting opportunity that I couldn't pass up. Ross Bigley, who is the mastermind behind the Milwaukee Short Film Festival, which a couple of my films have played at, wasn't able to do the festival this year, so he's doing a best of virtual festival, which my film, Do You Love Me, is part of. But with this virtual festival, he's kind of gotten some of his favorite films that he's ever shown at the festival and is playing them virtually this coming weekend. So, starting tomorrow, September 11th. And with it, he had asked me if I had any interest in interviewing any of the filmmakers, so I agreed. I actually got the chance to sit down and talk with Lynda Reiss, who is probably best known as a prop master for major Hollywood films turned filmmaker. And she made a film called Ready to Go, which is playing this weekend. And I had a fascinating talk with her. We talked about a lot. We talked about how she got involved in being a prop master, how she took everything she learned from being on set, being a prop master, and worked that into directing, and all the lessons you can learn about directing by doing these other jobs on set. And she's worked with a who's who of directors. She's got a chance to work with Alexander Payne. She worked on American History X, American Beauty, Reality Bites. She worked on Stranger Things. She worked on True Detective. This woman has an insane list of credits, has a lot of information to impart, made a really cool short film, and I think there's a lot we can learn from her because she had a very successful career as a prop master and decided that I don't want to do that anymore, not because I don't enjoy it, but because I would rather focus all my time and energy on becoming a filmmaker, becoming a director, because she's very much an all or nothing type of person. And, she even talks about how it can be difficult for you when not only you're a little older in age, but a female trying to get into this very male-dominated world, and how she's tackling that with gusto. So, yeah, this conversation of Lynda Reiss is fantastic. I had a great time. We went for about an hour and a half. I probably could have easily went longer, but I think what we have is phenomenal. I'm going to let you know right now there was a little bit of technical issues. If you hear my voice echoing at all throughout the episode, that was just me trying to fix some of the issues. But I think this conversation came out great, and I can't wait for you to hear my conversation with Lynda Reiss. And please check out the Milwaukee Short Film Festival's virtual festival this weekend. You will not be disappointed. There's a lot of fantastic films that I think you will really enjoy. So thank you very much for listening. And once again, the Milwaukee Short Film Festival starts September 11th, 2020. Give it a go. I think you guys are going to see some cool stuff. Thanks. Ross set this up for us. Okay. Real quick, are you already recording everything? So in case...
Yeah, he switched it on and he said it would just go indefinitely.
Perfect. How I like to do these is, I just like to get talking and just, see where the conversation takes us. I gave myself some rough notes, but I always kind of like the Dick Cavett way of doing things, of just make it a conversation.
Yeah.
And go from there. And usually what I'll do is, since I've been doing this podcast for about 4 years, it's primarily about film and cinema related, about... we create it with the whole intent of me and my friend who does it, we've realized in our time, not only studying film, but making film, that there's just some big films you miss sometimes. And you don't know quite why, but you do. Right. But then when you're in a group and people are like, oh, have you seen The Godfather? And instead of being like, no, you lie a little bit. You're like, yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I read the clip notes. I saw the trailer. It's all good.
So we created this show as a way to kind of like start talking about some of those movies and take ownership for the stuff that we haven't seen. But on top of that, since I'm so involved with the film culture of Wisconsin, as is Ross, I will occasionally do interviews. I've moderated panels for him, and I really just if it's movie related, even loosely, it's got a home in with what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. No, they were great. They showered my last film with awards. We Ready to Go won 4 awards with them in 2018. I was kind of like, I wasn't there. I was in the UK at the time, and I was like, wow, thank you.
It's kind of how I felt like I had a film that played there, I want to say 2013, 2014, and like it kind of gave me a big head cuz I made this film called From the Darkness Theater when I was in film school still.
Right.
And it was my senior thesis film and it won all the awards. I won every possible award I could win at our student film festival, which is a cool feeling once you're amongst your peers. But then it also went to the Cannes Film Festival and played.
Oh, wow, great. Good for you.
When you're in barely out of college, so like this film that I made in school played there. I had I won a competition where I could make another movie right after. It gave me a big head, and then same thing. Ross showered me with awards, and it sets you up. Like you kind of have to learn to manage like those expectations.
Yeah, no, my same thing. My first one, we didn't play at Cannes, but we did become Oscar eligible.
Wow.
And we got into 30 something festivals. It won like 28 awards, and all those awards were either best short or best director.
Mm-hmm.
And it got me into the Sony Directors Program.
Oh, what's that?
Which is a diverse directors program that they run, and then you're officially like part of the Sony family. It hasn't given me a paycheck yet. Let's just
it's something cool to put on a resume, I guess.
But it's a very cool thing to say that you're a part of. And everybody in Hollywood loves somebody who's chosen. Oh, you were picked for that? That's great. But the guy who ran that program became obsessed with my film. And that's it. It's like, other people are like, yeah, no, it's a good little film. I liked it. And the people who loved it were just like, angels sang when I watched, and I'm like, wow, okay, it's a good little film, but let's not get carried away here. It's not like, Citizen Kane or anything, but it's true. You do kind of, now my second film, I'm like, what do you mean it didn't get into that festival?
Yes. Like,
it's, what do you mean? I didn't win something there. I won something there last time. And then you start to realize that actually, it was kind of a big deal, because you kind of get to a point where you think, oh, well, everybody's film gets this stuff. Or it's not such a big deal. And then when you start to, there was a couple of festivals I got in before that we didn't get in this time. Very different film, Lancaster Park to Ready to Go. But it was wild because it was suddenly like I realized like, okay, it was a big deal to get as much as we got and get in the places we got. And it's not like you're automatically a shoo-in, even as an alum. And that as an alum of a festival where you've won before, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get in. I mean, my short this time is a minute and a half longer than their regular cutoff.
Yeah.
And Ross emailed me and he's like, I have been following. I see you have another film. Why haven't you sent it to us? And I was like, well, it's too long. And he said, how much too long? And I told him, and he goes, oh, send it.
Yeah. That's kind of how Ross is.
He said, if it was like 45 minutes, that's different. But, a minute and a half is not gonna, make that much difference to us.
Yeah. I have found with me, like you almost, it's in like you, I love every film I've made, but when one that you made so early on gets so much attention, and then like you put your heart into something else doesn't, you almost begin to resent that one film. Because like my follow-up film that I did to the one that caught all the attention was a big deal for me because there's an organization here in Wisconsin called Milwaukee Film, and they used to do this really cool program called the collaborative cinema, where they actually allowed high school students to write a script
Right.
and whatever they wanted to write, and then they turn them in. They would weed through them and like choose like 100 of them that had some potential in any way. They'd have them in and actually have screenwriters and filmmakers in Wisconsin kind of help them sculpt their idea, their story, and learn how to write a script. And then they go back and do another draft, and then they choose like the 10 best. And then they let filmmakers like myself come in and do a full-on pitch about which film they want to show. And I was chosen. They gave me like a bigger budget than I've probably ever had. I had I remember just one day where there was a generator on set that was probably the size of my living room. And I'm sitting there like, what is happening? And I don't think it played a single film festival outside of my home state.
Wow.
And it's like, it kind of had like tampered these expectations. It's like, just because it's a bigger film doesn't mean it's going to connect.
No,
it doesn't mean it's a bad film.
It
just
mean
doesn't connect.
a thing. Doesn't mean a thing. It's like I worked with Alexander Payne last year on a project.
Just going to casually name drop Alexander Payne.
I am going to casually name drop because that is just who I am, Mike. You have to get used to it.
Well, you have a lot of cool credits,
I do.
That's perfectly fine.
I said to somebody the other day, I need to get into this program because it will add gravitas to my resume. And she looked at me and she goes, you don't need any more gravitas on your fucking resume. No, I did this project with Alexander Payne, and we were talking about, I loved Nebraska, and I loved Election, and I loved all his smaller films, but Downsizing was so weird, so different. Mm-hmm. But it's his project. He had that project with him for like 10 years trying to get it made.
Yes.
And it was kind of like it was a big studio jump, right? So it went from like indie, low budget filmmaking to suddenly Downsizing was a much bigger budget, was a studio picture. And he said afterwards, I absolutely hated it. Mm-hmm. Because when you're an indie filmmaker, you might not have all the toys. You might have to be really clever about how you shoot stuff. But at the end of the day, you can decide what you're going to shoot, how you're going to shoot it, what the edit is like, and you own the final cut. When you do a studio film, you don't own the final cut. They own the final cut. And they can come in and make changes to your project afterwards. And, he said it was absolutely awful. He had people breathing down his neck constantly. And he said, I would never go back and do another one. And the project that I was going to work with him on, that actually it shut down because of some issues with the source material. And it was a small, tiny little budget thing that we were going to shoot in like 7 weeks. It was a road trip movie. It was a two-hander road trip movie,
Which is like, would be perfect. Like,
yeah, I was actually it was a shame because it was like, and it's so weird because Mads Mikkelsen was going to be in it, and they were shooting 2 days in Denmark, and so I had to fly to Denmark to prop him. And I'm flying back from Denmark, and I get this message going, we're shutting down. And I'm like, but I just propped the actor in Denmark, What's going on? It's crazy. I mean, I know that sounds odd when I said it was a small budget, but I had to they didn't want me to go. Yeah. And but that was the first time he was going to work. And I fought really hard, and I said, it's not, this one I was still propping. I'm like, it's not right to have a day player, prop person, prop my principal actor that I'm going to be working with for 9 weeks. as the prop master, I need to be there, talk to him, figure out what he needs, give him options with Alexander. And, and I fought really hard. And then I had to go to Alexander because he said, well, when we're in Denmark, and I'm like, they won't let me go. And he was like, well, that's rubbish. Go off down the hallway. She's coming. Get her a ticket. So it's like, thank you. Going to Denmark for 2 days. Awesome. Everyone like, so what did you see? And I'm like, the airport, the taxi, the hotel, the meeting room, the airport, the taxi, the hotel.
Yeah, very little. When you get that little time.
Yeah.
So you'd mentioned just a moment ago when you're telling your story that you said when I was propping. Are you no longer doing that anymore?
I am no longer propping. I only really opted last year to go back to do this project. Mm-hmm. For a couple of reasons. I worked with the designer on True Detective. Excuse me. And I really liked him. Plus, it would mean I would be standing next to Alexander Payne and watching him work, which is like a mini film school in itself. And as a, new coming director, any chance I have to watch how, watch people work and shadow to a certain extent, I want to take. And so that's why I went back to it. But no, pretty much I have said that's it. And I believe that, there's a lot of reasons, but I have to sever it because it's really hard for people when you've had a career like mine for 30 years. Mm-hmm. It's really hard for people to put you in another box if you keep drifting back and forth. Mm-hmm. And so I took all my savings and all my zero balance credit cards, and I am now almost retirement age, very poor director, because I spent everything getting to this point, and then COVID hit, which has been it's been good, but no choice, no, there's no option to go back.
Mm-hmm. You've kind of just put it all into
into
and
I have to, and it's just the way I am. Yeah. I'm kind of an all or nothing person anyway. And propping is, because I've been doing TV for the last 8 years, a television show is 9 months of insane work. It's really, I just go down the rabbit hole. It's really hard it's not like I could go, I can develop projects and take meetings and do things and come back and leave my people to run the set. I'm just not that kind of prop. Mm-hmm. So it's really, I think the top of my head would blow off. Plus, I'm just really done. It's been fantastic, but it's just not a big enough space for me to tell the stories I want, or to develop character, or to do things. And it's been fine, but it also gets to a point where, directors and actors, especially new or younger ones, tend to not want you to help them. And I sometimes don't know why, but
I have a theory on why.
Yeah.
So I am a younger director. I've not done a lot, but I've done a couple things. But with my experience being a younger director, and I'm fortunate enough that I got to go to an avant-garde film, like an art film school,
right?
Where some film schools and USC and schools like that are phenomenal, but they train you to be part of the machine, mm-hmm. which, if you want to work in the business, is a great way to go. I don't have those tools to work in the business because they didn't teach me how to grip. They didn't teach me how to light. They didn't teach me how to gaff. They didn't teach me how to do any of that stuff. But what they're really good about doing, they're like, here's a Bolex camera. Here's how you operate it. Buy yourself some film and go out and shoot something.
Right.
And we'll talk about it when you do. And they allowed us to fail. But because I went to a school like that, and I feel like, and it's not just my experience, but I'm kind of tying it all together. With a school like that, my Google Home just went off. My we learned a lot about the theory of filmmaking, and we learned a lot about these, the auteur theory, this idea of taking ownership for your film. And I know a lot of my friends, since we were making everything on our own, we sometimes have a hard time letting go because we didn't learn to work as a group. And I feel like with nowadays in film, and I'm not trying to sound like an old fogey in any way, but since everyone's got a really impressive camera in their pocket, they can go out and shoot something, and they're watching tutorials online. In a lot of ways, young filmmakers are learning to be extremely self-reliant and self-efficient, which is fantastic in a lot of ways, because no longer are you like, well, I can't make a movie because I don't have a crew, I don't have people, I don't have anything. You can just go out and make something and make it at a pretty decent level.
Oh yeah.
I think a lot of younger filmmakers are learning this very self-reliant style, and probably are also looking up to the masters of filmmaking who came in like with very strong visions, and they're thinking, well, that's what a director does, that's what a filmmaker does. You come in and you not in a bad way, but you boss your team around, you tell them what you want, and they make it, and not realizing that it is collaborative.
Right. Well,
you don't need to have all the answers. You need to be able to answer questions when they come to you, but you need to trust your costumer or your prop master.
Absolutely, because by being closed to that, you are closing off people bringing you something that might blow you out of the water. Yes. And go, oh my God, I never thought of that. That's fantastic. And at the end of the day, moving from propping to directing, I've learned this from really good directors too. It's like you hire really brilliant people to do the work, and you let them do the work, because that's what they do all the time. They prop all the time, or they costume design all the time. That's their job. That's their career. They've spent their entire life honing their skills to this point to give you what you need.
Yeah,
so when you allow that to happen, you get all, and you can go, that's really fantastic. Not going to work for this project, but I really love it. And at the end of the day, it's going to be my name that says director. It's not going to say committee of, department heads directed this movie. It's like my name will be on it. I'll ultimately have the last word. But you've got to be open to all the things that could come. And it's the same with actors. It's like, let's talk about who the character is, and let's talk about all the things, where you came from, what you are, who you are, so that when you go on set, your responses are organic. I mean, some actors really do want you to say, look right now. But, there are more that would rather go in and having learned with you who that person is.
Yeah.
Go in and then I go, okay, let's just run it. And then you see what happens, and you go, oh, again, wow. Yeah. I hadn't even thought of you delivering it that way, but you know what? That's great. Or you then have to go in and gently maneuver if it's really they're coming from 180 degrees and it's not. So I think it's that combination of being strong enough to know how to gently say no to people if their ideas aren't working, but also being open enough to let everybody come to you with their ideas. It can get a little overwhelming if you're not used to, I'm used to that from 30 years in filmmaking. I think it can be really overwhelming if it's like your first or second film and you've not had 50 people coming up going, this pen or this pen, or this jacket or this jacket, or this thing or what do you like? What background person do and if you can get overwhelmed.
Yeah.
If you're not experienced or strong enough to be able to look at all those things.
I also think too it's especially like because like I got started in school making films,
Right.
and since so many if I'd have friends come up to be like, oh, I would love to do costuming for your film, cool, but then it's a learning process for everyone, because I've had people who weren't costume designers professionally or whatever, but were like, well, I want to do costumes, I got a good eye, cool, but they don't come to you with options. But like, what do you want them to look like? So then some younger directors they stress themselves out thinking they need all the answers because no one's bringing them things.
Right.
But the turning point for me, I remember there was I heard this quote very early on when I was directing, and it really set things straight for me. I was listening to an interview with Edgar Wright. And there was a period of time when Steven Spielberg was making The Adventures of Tintin, when he was doing that adaptation of Tintin, which was great for me because I grew up with the cartoon, so I was really excited for that. But Edgar Wright was on the writing team for that movie. And someone had asked him, was like, well, what it was like working with Spielberg? And he's like, working with Spielberg is phenomenal, because you're sitting in a writer's room and you're pitching out ideas and he's sitting there taking it all in. And he doesn't have this big head about him where like, well, I didn't come up with the idea, so I don't want to use it. He takes the best ideas because, just like you said, at the end of the day, it's a Steven Spielberg film. No one's going to care who came up with what specific idea.
Right.
If it's a good idea, it's a good idea. And if you're so full of yourself where you can't take a good idea, it's going to ultimately
it's only going to make you look better. I mean, that's what I would always say to, it's like, all I'm trying to do is take this story and make it the very best it can be.
Yes.
That's what I'm offering you. If you decide, that you are absolutely, don't want to take that on board, then, that hasn't happened, more than a couple of times, but it's enough that I was just like, no, I'm done with.
So I definitely want to cycle back to propping at sometime, but I do have the question. Did you always want to direct, or was that something that came later on?
I didn't at the beginning. I moved back to the UK for a while to get my kid through like high school. Just because I'm single parent and I didn't want to deal with a teenager and working 80 hours a week. And when I was back in the UK,
I don't blame you.
I opened a prop shop, but on the side, I was directing theatre. A friend of mine was an amateur dramatic, we had a beautiful Victorian theatre where I was living. And she said, oh, we're doing Steel Magnolias. Will you come and direct it? And I was like, sure. And I had such a good time doing it. And I realized that it was very organic for me I knew how to talk to act. I knew how to get actors to do what I needed them to do without it being bossy, if you know what I mean. It's how you can have a suggestion in a conversation that makes them go, oh, a light bulb moment, that's what you want. And I realized when I was doing that I'd kind of been doing that in my head for years. So I'm standing at camera, ready to hand the prop over. They do a rehearsal. It's not really working. The director would go in on various different projects. And I'd sit there and I'd go, if they just said this, I bet that they would make sense. That would make sense to them. And you'd watch them circle round for like 15 minutes and eventually they would kind of come to that point. And so I realized I'd sort of been doing it, and then you're doing shots, you're filming something, and I'm like, why are we shooting this? There's no way that this is going to cut in.
Yeah.
I don't see how this is going to be used in this scene with the way they've shot everything else. So I was learning and doing it in my head for a long time. And then I was again, when I had gone back to the UK, I hooked up with a short film training program, and I was running classes for production design and art direction and propping, and I was helping production design these shorts. And the guy who ran the program came to me and said, "Look, you have never directed one. Why don't you direct? Why didn't you direct one?" Because they had a fund, and he said, you, and I'm like, "Well, I don't write. I haven't got a script." And he's like, people, get somebody to write your script and do it. And that was what Ready to Go became. So it was kind of like I had been doing it all along, and then when I actually did it, I realized I should have tried to do it a lot earlier.
So is that how Ready to Go happened?
Yeah, it's exactly how Ready to Go happened.
So I was going to ask you about that, like, because I had, I watched it just the other day. I actually watched it twice because I was really enamored with it. I was going to ask why that film first. Was that a script that was sent to you? Did you work with a writer on it?
The writer,
Tell me a little bit about this.
the writer was also the DP.
Okay.
And he had DP'd and written 4 shorts that I had production designed. And we originally met when he called me up and was getting ready to do a small, tiny little film, and they needed some props. And I had the prop house. And so he called and he was like, "Well, is there a chance that we could make a deal? We don't have any money." And I'm like, "Okay, well, are you the designer?" And he said, "No, I'm not. I'm the DP and the writer, but we don't have a designer. I'm like, "Do you have anybody in the art department?" And he said, "We don't have anybody in the art department." And I'm like, "Okay, being an art department person, I think that's really silly, so I'll do it for you. And I'll bring you whatever you need, and I won't charge you." And he and I have such a symbiotic aesthetic of filmmaking and vision that it was such a joy to work with him. And that particular film was directed by somebody else. And at the end of the day, I remember watching it and going up to John and saying, "Well, the words were great and the sets looked awesome and your filmmaking was incredible.
Yeah.
It's a shame about the rest of it. The actors weren't great. They did an ending, and the director changed the ending, and I was like, that's just so wrong. It just doesn't make any sense." The audience is going to come away going, "What the fuck?" And not in a good way.
Yes. There's this complete
there's a
difference.
definite, WTF at the end of movies where let's go to a bar and talk about this for 5 hours because it's great. Yes. Rather than, what did I just see? And that didn't make any sense. And so he and I worked together. So when my friend said, "Get a script," I called John up and I said, "All right, I want you to write me something." And he always, he's a writer, so there's half-finished ideas and notes and things everywhere, and he's always got like 5 or 6 things bubbling around in his head. And I said, my parameters are that I want it to be a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end, because as a first-time director, I don't want to do... A lot of shorts are like this little slice of life or some weird little moment in time, and they're great. But for me, as a storyteller, I need the story. I need to know the 3 places, and then I can flesh all that out. Once I have those bones, then I can make it something great. And I can figure out what happened way before the beginning of our movie and what's going to happen way after we're finished. And that all, for me, helps me be able to make the best 10 minutes I can. And so he wrote me something and he sent it to me, and I was like, yeah, it's okay, not great, And he's like, "Look, if you don't like it, it'll just go in the I'll make it one day pile, and I'll do something else." And he did, and I got Ready to Go. and I read it, and I could see it in my head as I was reading it.
Mm-hmm.
I just knew what I want. The cutaways, all the cutaways in it are not scripted,
Mm-hmm.
but I saw the cutaways when I was reading.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because when I told him I wanted to do that, he was like, "Oh, okay, that might be a bit odd." The wonderful thing about John is he'll give you a script and then it's yours. He's not at camera going, "Well, that's not what I wrote," or "I didn't mean that."
He's not precious about it.
No, he's like, "Look, it's now you're making, here's a script, you go make a Lynda Reiss film."
That's really cool.
Yeah, and he's awesome, and he's like my DP for life on that side of the pond. I have a DP for life on this side of the pond, but John is my DP for life on the other side of the pond. And he's just, we just have such a similar aesthetic that we work well together.
Are you both from the UK? You and your
I was actually born in New York.
Okay.
I was raised in the UK. My parents are British. And so I have a home there, and I go back and forth. John was from, when I say the UK, it's actually the Isle of Man, which is a tiny little island in the Irish Sea, where we all live. So that's where John grew up. He's in London now. But that's where I met him.
Okay.
And he went to the London Film School, and he's very much of the, we would sit and talk about film, and he'd start talking about these obscure Russian filmmakers or some Czech thing that was shot in 1930, and I'm like, dude, I just like Steven Spielberg, and I like, I'm a Capra kind of, I'm not like dark and but I love dark stories.
Yeah.
So it's, but I like a narrative. I like, I want people to think, but not to have to think too hard.
Do you think your since especially on Ready to Go, do you think your two styles blended well together? You are, pardon my terminology, but you're a little bit more pop. He's a little bit more underground.
Yeah, we come up. That's why that had that feel. It came out so well because of that. That he can bring, almost like a visual. But I was very specific. We shot listed that, and I was very specific about how I wanted it to look. And we spent months. I was in Georgia working on Stranger Things, and he was in London. No, I think he might have been in Russia filming a movie. But we would send pictures back and forth, or I saw this thing and I love this framing, or I want this, or I had and he tempered down a little bit of my pop, because it would have had even more of a Wes Anderson feel than it did if he hadn't tamed me back a little bit.
Well, then I'm actually curious who came up with, because one aspect that really tripped my trigger as being a student of film and just loving everything. Like I love everything from the big broad rom-coms to the weirder Czech films.
Right.
I'm curious whose idea this was. The aspect ratio changes and the very specific look of those flashbacks. That was you. Because those were great, because I got a very clear idea of either when these situations were supposed to take place, and I got a very specific idea of how they were supposed to look and feel based on that. The first one, I remember it kind of felt like you were watching off of an old console television.
Yeah, exactly. That was exactly it. I wanted his visual memory to be from images that he would have seen. So you're right. The first one was definitely console television. Then the prison one had a very noir We took
Oh, I
noir.
love the lighting on his face.
Oh
when
my
he's sitting in
God,
the...
that was so funny because I'm telling John this, and my producer. That was the other thing. It's like, let's do something that's really simple, and then I'm like, okay, well, I have to build the set, and then I want all these cutaways, and I need a train, and I need this, and I need that, and
Get me a train.
you know, but I knew exactly how, because I had seen can't remember what the movie was, but Fonda, Jane Fonda's father. What's his first name?
Peter?
Peter. No. Yes.
Wait, no. I get the Fondas all mixed up.
Anyway, he played in Job in Grapes of Wrath. He's a Fonda. He's the father, the way that he father. Anyway, he's in a noir movie where he's in prison, and it's exactly that. It's a wall and a table, and you don't ever see the bars.
It's such
You
a
just see the
simple way to
shadows.
do it.
And I explained this to John, and everyone's like, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. And we have to build the bars anyway. And so I'm driving down the road, and the Isle of Man is a very rural neighborhood, rural place, a lot of farms. And I kept seeing these farm gates. And I'm like, those farm gates, if you turn this way and look at them, look just like prison bars. They're set up the same way. They have the slats going down. They're round this way with the slats going down. So then I drove off and I found a farm and I went in and I said, do you have a farm gate that I can have to use? I'll bring it back. And a farmer gave me 2 farm gates, and we went and picked them up, and we stood them up with stands, and we lit it from the side. And that one is very crisp. So I wanted it to have that very noir feel to it. And the train, that's another thing. What's great about shooting on the Isle of Man is we have a steam train that runs on the Isle of Man. It's a tourist attraction. But because it's a tiny little place and my producer grew up there, she's able to call up, hi, Bob, at the train thing. We want to use the train and go on the tracks. And this was very shortly after Sarah died on the train tracks in Georgia, and so I was very conscious of being smart and safe about how we did it. And they were great. They said, okay, the last train heads towards, and John and I had picked a spot on the train track, and then John was like, this isn't going to work because there's trees. And we're going to have to wait between the time of the train and then shooting her on the track so that we can map them. And it could be 20 minutes or half an hour. And we'll have shadow movements, and that will make it really hard. So we have to find somewhere where you don't have any tall trees that would cast shadows across the track. So we found the spot that we ended up filming in. And it was great. We were on the radio to the train guy, and we're like, okay, so when you come around, can you make the steam come out, and can you do the hoo? And it came around, and it's like, tell everybody on the train not to wave at the film crew when they go by, and it was great. And so then they went, and it landed in its sleeping place at the end of the day, and we get the radio, okay, it's in, it's off the track and in its, garage. And you can put your girl on the track. And we tied her up down there. And that was the first scene I saw in my head, that train track scene. And that particular actress was exactly who I saw. She's very, she does a lot of theater. So theater actors tend to be much more effusive than film actors. And I'm like, silent film people were theater people. They were very effusive.
They were big.
Yeah. And I'm like, Kat Gorn is the girl who's going to go on that train track. I have to have her. And I had, we threw her down and tied her up, filmed it, and my editor put it together. And I have to tell people. And it's funny because you look at it, you know that if you look at it technically, you know that it could never have really been shot. Because we cut out of it when the train is practically on top of her. And so you know, in reality, that you could never have done that. Even if you'd done it in reverse, you couldn't have done it. But I have to tell people because everybody thinks it's stock footage.
No, it's well, I can see why they think that.
Yeah.
Because it's very convincing looking.
Right. As filmmakers don't ever think it's stock footage.
Yes.
But
Like
audience members go, wow, you shot that?
And I love stuff like that because I remember like when I first started getting into film, like I used to watch a lot of movies with my mom and like point things out and everything. She used to be like, I hate watching movies with you because you tell me everything's done. And then for me, knowing how it's done or trying to figure out how it's done is so much fun for me. But what I absolutely loved about that story is I think it's a fantastic lesson out there for any filmmaker that, you didn't have a huge budget on this film. You did this out of love. And then what you can all do with just making a couple phone calls, asking favors, and being creative.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
sure... it was, I mean, Kevin Doyle. My producer is a casting agent, a background artist, extras casting agent. She's done a lot of shorts. She produced several of the shorts that John and I worked on. And she said, look, let's put it together. You come up with a list of names of like British TV actors and we'll just ask. And so I, at the time I was like, and I'm like, look, I'm terrible with names and I kind of know faces, but I said to John, look, you have an idea of who Lance is. Why don't you pull some TV faces and send them to me and I'll look and pick somebody. And then Bev did it. And Bev, my producer, sent me a picture of Kevin. And I was like, and I think there was 5 actors that I chose. And we sent them off and 3 were a straight out no. And 2 were unavailable, and the 2 that were unavailable, one of them was Kevin. And then we had to push a week because John got a paying gig and was leaving to go to shoot in Europe. And so we went back to the 2 actors, and Kevin became available, and he was fantastic. And he said, I really loved the script. And he said, the week that I got that script, I also got a script to go and shoot a feature as number 1 on the call sheet for 6 weeks in Canada. And I got your short, and they were both at the same time. And I called my agent up and said, much as I'd like to go to Toronto, I really want to do this short that I'm not going to make any money on. And you're not going to make any money on, but I'm not really in love with the Canada script. So he turned down a feature film to do my short. And he said, I absolutely loved the story. And he said, and I loved the idea of working with somebody who is changing hats. He said, because I've worked with a lot of new directors, and a lot of times, you kind of end up having to direct yourself. And he said, and I thought it would be really interesting to see how it would be with somebody who, and he said, I know props, you're with the actors all the time, you're with the director all the time, you're at camera all the time. He said, I assumed that you probably would have absorbed by osmosis, if nothing else, at least some idea. And he said, and at the end of the day, it was 3 days. And, if it turned out awful, nobody would see it and it wouldn't matter. But the production gods shined on me when they gave him to me because he was such a joy. He was such a joy to work with. And he gave my film such international recognition because everybody knows Downton. People would come up, how did you get Mr. Mosley? How did you get Mr. Mosley? What's he like? I mean, we were filming in this tiny barn and we built the set, and I was like, we need to have like a green room for Kevin and get a chair and let's have a heater and have a table, and is there Wi-Fi in there, and do we need a Wi-Fi hotspot, and because I'm so used to like Hollywood actors. And he arrived and I'm like, this, and he said, oh no, I'll just have a chair down here, just one of those folding ones is fine. And then he, went and changed and came down, and we were still tweaking the lighting, and he's like, got this big bag of chocolate-covered ginger and crystallized ginger, and he's going around introducing himself to all the crew. It's like, have a bit of chocolate, Hi, I'm Kevin, nice to meet you. And the cat was a bigger diva than Kevin was.
It's always great when that happens, because you've worked on a lot of sets, worked with a lot of big names, and there are some people that I'm sure you've worked with that are surprising that they are the way they are, and there are some people who are surprising how kind and giving they are. Yeah. I haven't done much on big sets. Funny enough, the one big film I did work on, I did work in the art department. I kind of failed upwards. A friend of mine was working on makeup on the film, and they're shooting in my hometown. Had Sean Astin and Chris Mulkey in it.
I love Sean Astin.
And I was just hanging around, because I was taking her to set some days, and I was hanging around, and I got to know the line producer, and he was like, well, I can't have you just hanging around. Do you want to be a PA or something? And he's like, we'll pay you. And they paid me way less, but I wasn't working, so it was something. And just through working and doing jobs, I eventually wound myself up to be the assistant to the art director.
Oh wow!
But one of the things that really made a big impression on me was the first day that Chris Mulkey came to set. He found out where like the PAs and the the really undercard people were at, and he sat down with us and had lunch.
Yeah.
We didn't, not at a table or anything. We were just sitting on a couple rocks, and he just sat with us and talked with us. And I was a big fan of Twin Peaks, so I was talking to him about that. And then he was just in The Purge when that came out, so like I was talking about all these things. But
right.
he's very kind and giving. And situations like that, when you have an actor who is a relatively big name, willing to just be so genuine and a real person with you, it makes it kind of energizes the entire crew and makes everyone want to try that much harder.
Right, that's exactly it. I am always amazed that people who are badly behaved don't realize that they are really kind of screwing themselves. Because people won't go the extra mile.
Yeah. Because
you're not, I mean, filmmakers, I always say that we're like whores for the thank you. I'll work 18 hours a day in the mud and the grime, and everybody will be yelling. And if the director turns around at the end of the day and goes, oh my God, guys, thank you so much. You're like, okay, yeah, I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah, and especially if you can feel that it's a genuine thank you.
Even if it's not.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I've done a lot for a half-assed thank you.
Right, but people who know, there's a producer that I worked with who I was amazed. He knew not only everybody's name, from the PAs to the drivers to the actors, and this was a big show with probably a round, camera, 150, 180 person crew, big television show. He knew everybody, but not only did he know their names, like I'd get in a van to go somewhere and he would be there and somebody would get in and he's like, hey, how was the, did they win the baseball tournament? I mean, he knew everybody's kids, what everybody was doing, and I was like, wow. And he said, well, when we're shooting, my job's pretty much done, so I don't have a lot to do, so it's easy to make, But he said, it just, I want everybody to know part of my job is to have the crews back and to know that I care about them, because I'm going to need them to go the extra mile a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm going to need to be able to go round and say, you know, we're going to have to do an extra 2 hours today, or we're going to have to shoot right through because we're behind and we're going to lose the light, and we'll bring box lunches. You know, it's not just about getting the extra money for meal penalties or anything. It's just having somebody come up and go, I'm not taking advantage of you. I'm not just screwing you because I know I can. I'm going to come and talk to you and know that, you know, and then you know that you can go to them and say, you know, I really need this, or you know what? I didn't spend all that money in that episode. Have that back for somebody else. I'm sure you need it somewhere else or something. You know, it's like you want to do things for people who care. And that's one of the, you know, for me, one of the lessons. I mean, I would have my own crew when I propped, and I tried to do it within my own crew. But moving to directing, it's one of the big things I've taken along with me is, even if I can't remember everybody's name, I can still greet everybody and talk to everybody and thank everybody at the end of the day. And if we're doing a particularly difficult shot, understand that stuff happens.
Yeah.
You know, and hopefully if you've hired really good people and everybody's working at their best and something happens, it really is just one of those moments, an accident or something. It's not incompetence. And when things happen and you have directors who are screaming, you know, if you only knew how to do your effing job and you know, why are you even here? You kind of go, okay, well, I don't think I want to do anything else for you, buddy. Thanks. Anyway.
Yeah.
You know, and there are people like that. It was starting to change a little bit. With the Me Too, because not only the harassment, like the sexual harassment, but verbal harassment was starting to be addressed. And you've worked on film sets. There's a lot. Tempers are frayed and people are stretched. But you don't have to yell. And I mean, I've done it. You know, I've yelled. Not as a director, but as a prop person, just kind of like, you know, you go to the truck and you start yelling at everybody going, I got it was just too much. But just being aware now that, you know, you can be fired.
Yeah.
For that.
It's funny. I remember hearing a story, comedian turned filmmaker Bobcat Goldthwait. He tells a story about directing, and he says, because he said sometimes you lose your temper and you yell without even realizing it's happening. So, and he said he never wants to be that person even when it happens. So he actually every day to set wears a dumb hat, whether it be like a sombrero or something that just looks ridiculous on him.
Right.
So that way, if you're ever if he ever accidentally yells at you, you can know that he looks like the idiot wearing a sombrero yelling at someone.
That's a really good thing.
He kind of takes the power away from himself by making it a joke automatically. And he said he's always quick to apologize, but half the people can't take him seriously anyways because he looks like a fool.
Right. No, that's good. That's really good. You know, I like to hear those kind of stories.
I've met very few prop people. You know, so the film I worked at, the woman who was running the art department, it wasn't her day job. It was something that she had done work for, especially because Wisconsin's a very small community and everyone kind of wears multiple hats. Tell me a little bit about being a prop master, like what all it entails and how you got involved with it.
Okay, so a prop master pretty much organizes anything that an actor touches. There are obviously gray areas between costume, gray areas between set decoration. We work with everybody. I can work with electricians about flashlights, you know, because that becomes a lighting source. You know, Stranger Things. I know more about flashlights than anybody ever needed to know in their entire life. You know, a chair's a chair until somebody picks it up and hits somebody over the head with it. So then it's a mixture of props and set deck and effects. So, but that's what we do. We find everything. We build character. You can establish what somebody, where their socioeconomic level is in life by what they have. You know, you wouldn't have, I mean, extreme. You wouldn't have a homeless guy wearing a Rolex, you know, but you wouldn't have the guy wearing a Rolex pushing a shopping cart. You know, I mean, that's an extreme version. The opening scene, the first time you know, everybody knows Stranger Things. The first time we go into Chief Hopper's home, they pan by a drawing that a child's done, and then they go over a table, and on the table is like pill bottles and half-eaten sandwiches and beer, and you can tell this guy's a slob. And then you go by and there's more of that same stuff, and everything's just like a big mess. And there he is, this guy who's overweight and drooling asleep on the sofa. The man hasn't moved or spoken, and you already have a whole catalogue of who he is. And then he puts a police uniform on, and then the whole catalogue changes again.
Yep.
So you already have in your mind, as the audience member, the stereotypes that would fit with all those pieces of dressing. So with propping, you can add to that and embellish who they are by what they have and why they have it. So it would be as much, you know, it's the obvious ones are rings and watches and eyewear. We do computers, we do food, we do, you know, like all that dressing that I just described, the kid's picture, all the stuff that's on the tables, all his police uniform, all of that stuff. That was all me. That was all me. That was all the prop department. We kind of ice the cake. We come and lay the life layers on the top. You know, so it's that's how we do what we do. There are, there's silly things like we do license plates on cars, and those are boring. But there is a whole Reddit subset, I believe, on there's a series of cleared numbers for license plates, and people pick it up and go, okay, 2 PCE whatever has been so and so's car and so and so's car and so and so's car. It's crazy how people have way too much time on their hands. So we work with the designers, we work with the actors, we work with the director. I have to do a ton of research. There are projects like American History X. I had to do a ton of research on things that I didn't really ever want to know about, like the Aryan nation. But through that research, I met a guy who ran a Scared Straight program, who was a former prisoner, who was a former head of a prison group of the Aryan nation. Wow. Had all the ink, all of the things, and he sort of was born again and ran this Scared Straight program with kids to make them not fall into this these right-wing Aryan Nazi groups.
Wow.
He, in turn, was able to hook me up with about 150 guys that ran programs with him all through California. All had all the ink, everything, the attitude, but they were all reformed. They ended up being our background prisoners in the prison scenes in American History X, and added this amazing weight to it of reality that you wouldn't have got with regular background being brought in, and you know, they just there's there's a movement and a swagger and an attitude that an ex-con has that the regular people don't have.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, when you're paying somebody $75 a day to stand in the back and lift weights, or, you know, just smoke cigarettes in a prison yard, you're not going to get that. But these guys brought all that. And that came from doing all of my research. And so I love that. I mean, you get to learn new things. I have a lot of knowledge about a lot of different things. Some of it has been awesome, and some of it, like I said, you know, I don't necessarily need to know that there's that many people who are Nazis and don't believe the Holocaust happened in the world. I don't need to know that, but I do know it now.
Yeah. So how did you get involved, or how does one get involved with doing propping?
Okay, I kind of fell into it. I've always been creative. As a kid, I wanted this particular dollhouse. The English equivalent to Barbie was called Cindy, and she had an apartment, and I desperately wanted this thing. And it wasn't like I was, you know, destitute or poor, but there wasn't a ton of extra money, and this thing was expensive. And I basically got the doll, but I didn't get all the rest of the stuff. So I ended up building this thing out of cardboard boxes and yogurt pots and toilet roll holders, and I made not only her apartment but this entire apartment complex in my bedroom. I built this whole world, and I was always, anytime I saw stuff that I liked, I would be like, well, I can make that, or I can build that, or I can paint that, or I can sew that, or I can do that. So I was always making things. Then a friend of mine was in production, and I was a nanny. I'm a trained nanny, which is really good for working with actors, by the way. I'm just saying, because they're all children. And I didn't really, I got to a point where I was like, I don't want a nanny anymore. And he said, look, why don't you get into production? And I was like, okay. I talked to another friend who was a prop master, and I said, if I'm going to finally, after all these years living in California, go into film, I'd rather do something creative.
Yeah.
Rather than, you know, be driving around, you know, getting somebody's coffee. And so he helped me create a resume, and this was way before the internet and way before everything else. So I was going through Dramalog and Screen Daily, whatever it was then, and all the production 411 books that had everybody's phone numbers, making hundreds of phone calls, sending things off. I think I sent like 500 resumes out with like photocopy in the envelope, lick it, stick it, post it thing the first week. And 2 weeks later, I was production designing appalling music videos on the weekend and this was like the sort of late 80s. And so just think sort of glam rock, you know, crazy, coked up madmen with big hair who were doing these flamboyant videos and were all just... I actually threw a bucket of water over one of them. I was so annoyed because the guy's like drunk and passed out, and I'm like, I just went in and I'm like, look, I'm here working for free. Get up, get in there so that we can shoot this. And I was a PA during the week. And I was working for a production company, and I was getting people's coffee and waiting for the electrician at their homes and picking up their dry cleaning. And then on the weekends, I would go off and work on short films and student films and anything that I could. And I built up a reel, and the people that I was working for as a PA knew I was doing that. And they were like, well, let's see what you got. Show us your stuff. And I would show them, and then I always ended up, when we were shooting commercials, a lot of commercials, sort of gravitating towards the art department as the PA help, because I was sort of on staff with this company, but when they filmed, I was a PA on set, and I would always end up gravitating towards the art department. And so between them letting me move up and meeting prop people and art department people in commercials who then would bring me on as a lowly set dresser art person. That's how I built it up, and I did that for maybe 3 years, working all the time, to build up enough contacts. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, same thing that I did with directing. I want to be a prop person, so I have to not take any set dresser jobs. I have to not take any like art runner jobs. I have to not take any PA jobs. I have to only take prop jobs, because otherwise people will not think of me as a prop person. And so that's how, and I ended up getting offered a feature. I had not ever prop mastered anything. And I got offered a really little low budget non-union feature to prop master. And that was how I sort of started. And I was doing, ridiculously tiny little straight to video things. And I had worked as an assistant prop master on a couple of movie of the weeks. And I got a call from one of the designers that I'd worked with as an assistant. The prop master I worked with was terrible. I ended up doing his job the whole time. He was never there. And she called me and she said, I have this tiny little movie. It's non-union. Would you come in and meet them? They can't. We've interviewed a lot of people and the director doesn't really like anybody. And I went in and met them, and that was Reality Bites.
Would you say that was your first big film?
Yeah. So that was, I was actually in prep on some kung fu movie, some weird little kung fu movie, and I had to leave my assistant to take over that, because I was like, look, this was it. Reality Bites was Stacey Sher, Danny DeVito, Michael Schamberg were producing, Stiller was directing, Winona Ryder was in it. I was like, this is a big movie for me. It's a big move up.
Yeah.
And so I did that, and that moved me up a level. And then I got in the union, and I did Tracy Ullman for a long time, which was really great. And I had worked with the AD on American Beauty on a feature prior, and it was the same thing. They brought me in there, and that was the there are pivotal moments in your career. Reality Bites was one. American Beauty moved me from being, a prop master on tiny little indie films to, okay, you're one of the big kids now. And so that moved me up to a different level. And so that was how that was really what my career trajectory had been. And I ended up doing bigger features. Then we left for like 8 years, so my kid to go through high school and college in the UK, and I would come back and do the odd project. I came back and did Eagle Eye for DJ Caruso in the middle of that, and then I was like, okay, well, I think maybe I'll come back now. My daughter was born here in California, and she couldn't wait to leave the Isle of Man and come back to California. And so I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll come back. Maybe I'll come back and see if I can get a job.
Yeah.
And I worked with a director called Alison Anders. And we had done a movie called Grace in My Heart. And she called me out of the blue when I was just thinking about it. I was in England, just thinking about it. And she said, I'm doing a movie in Georgia. And it's a period music movie. And I want you here. I'm begging them to bring you. Will you come and do it? And I came back and I was like, who am I kidding? I love this thing. I love doing this job and they pay well. And I was like, okay, yeah. I did it. Went back to England. Got a phone call. Can you come back? Would you come to Louisiana? We're doing a cop show. And I was like, sure. And that was True Detective. And when we did it, it's so funny because you talk about, everyone's like, oh, how did you come back to do the biggest show? And I'm like, look, when I got that phone call, the reconnaissance hadn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling people like, well, who's in it? And I'm like, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. And they're like, oh, what, the guy from Cheers and that guy who does romantic comedies?
Yeah.
They're doing a cop movie.
It hadn't quite hit yet, yeah.
You know, and then it became, you know, the biggest thing you ever saw. So it was the same with Stranger. It was like I got the call for that, and I knew I wanted to do it. And people said, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm doing like this little 80s kids show. You know, and it just sort of blew out the water. I'd love to say it was all me both times, but no. But I've just been really lucky, and the projects that I've picked have been, you know, I've had some really bad ones too.
Mm-hmm.
There was a boxing movie I did called Price of Glory, and one of my directors after American Beauty gave me a T-shirt that said, for every American Beauty there's a price of glory. It was just which is a bit mean because Price of Glory was not a horrible movie, but you know, it was kind of like, you know, for every brilliant thing that you do, there's 10 not so brilliant things that you have to do to pay the bills. So
And sometimes you can't know. You don't know.
you don't know. I didn't know. I didn't know American Beauty. We didn't know American Beauty at the time was going to be what it was. I didn't know the Stranger. I knew that I liked the scripts. I knew that I liked the writing. But even when you're making them, I worked on a movie called Sea of Trees in with Gus Van Sant in Massachusetts. It was Matthew McConaughey, and this was after the reconnaissance. Gus Van Sant directing. I read this script and I'm like, oh my God, this has got Oscar all over it. And Ken Watanabe was in it too.
Okay.
We filmed it. It was booed at Cannes. And it tanked. And when I read that, I was like, and I watched it and I got it. It didn't turn out great. But at the time and when I read it, I would have sworn that it was going to be this big event. And it was, you know, when you're booed at Cannes and you're Matthew McConaughey after the reconnaissance, it's got to be pretty bad.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know.
Yeah.
Which was a shame.
So, if someone wanted to get into doing propping, what advice would you give them?
I would say, depending on where they are, if you want to work in the art department, you want to work your way up through the art department, film school is not where you should be. You should save your money and not go to film school. I tell people, if you want to work in the art department, you know, tell your parents, fund me the housing that you would pay if I went to school, and give me a small allowance and let me go PA and work on projects. And within 2 years, they'll be, you know, funding themselves, or they won't be in film anymore. Because it's not for everybody. It's a carny life, and it's a freelance life, and you have to accept that every time you finish a job, you're looking for a new job all the time. It's not like you get hired for 5 years or whatever, you know. It's all the time. It's a new job. There's a program, if people are in California or are willing to move to California, there's a program called Hollywood HPR, and I'll get you the info and I will send it to you so that you can have it if you want to link it anywhere.
Yeah, definitely.
Basically what it is it's an 18-month program, and they treat you and they work it through. It's for below the line. So it's for the trades. It's for grip, electric, art department, propping. It was started by a prop master.
Union jobs.
Yeah, but what they do is they have signed up with the union. So if you complete this 18 months, you get this diploma, you can then go and sign up with the union. That qualifies you to get in.
Wow, okay.
Which is almost impossible in this town.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Georgia has a program similar. If people are in the South there, that local in Georgia has a 18-month school program that offers the same thing. You end up interning almost on a movie for 30 days or a television show at the end of it, and you can get into the union. And I personally think that kind of... I'm a firm believer in training.
Okay.
I really feel that there's a lot of people get in on projects where the unions will come in and turn the projects from non-union to union. And you get a lot of people who haven't done anything, haven't worked as an assistant, haven't worked their way up, haven't done things, and they're suddenly sort of running the show. I had a young man come and work for me once, and he was quite cocky, and he said, "Well, I'm a prop master." Okay, great. Well, I need an assistant, so that's that. And he went on to explain that he had been hired as a PA, and the entire art department quit, and he ended up having to run be a PA, run the prop department, and they turned the show. So he went from his first movie as a PA to getting into the union as a prop master. Wow. And he said, "So I'm a prop master," and I'm like, "I have a whisk. It doesn't make me Gordon Ramsay."
Mm-hmm.
You're not a prop master yet. You might have the title, you might have a card that says you are, but you're not yet.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be quiet and learn. And
Exactly.
I think that if you get a chance to work for somebody, do it. Find, and there's so many shows in so many places now that are not covered by the union. I did season 3 of True Detective in Arkansas. We were able to hire art department PAs there, which you can't do in California.
Mm-hmm.
That if you can, find out the local state, film commission who's working, just go in and see if you can PA or intern or shadow or do whatever. But the most important thing is, if you say you're going to do it and you want to do it, do it. Show up every day and do whatever they tell you to do.
Yeah.
So to show up and get on with it. And it's not glamour. You might be in cleaning, tires, or, unpacking, or in your car shopping, or doing everything. I mean, with COVID now, all of that's slightly changing with new protocols, but ultimately we'll probably go back to the old way. But just try and find places that you can work.
Yeah.
As a PA or as an intern.
And
Like I said, Georgia, Florida's right, any right to, and I'm a union person, and I thank the Lord for the union. They've given me a lot. But the right to work states are the easiest places if you want to start your career. Florida, Georgia. I don't know what Milwaukee is, what Wisconsin is. But if it's a right to work state, you can have a union, but they can't not hire you if you're not union.
Mm-hmm.
So you can hire non-union people in to positions. So if you find some, and it's like, and watch movies, read, learn, see, watch a movie and break it down in, what people are using, it's like, okay, well, what would be the props in this scene? What would be, the dressing? Understand all the, is that your Doug? Understand all the visual cues that you're given all the time. It's like, if you can do your own film school without, I feel that a lot of film schools, like you were saying, your film school, it's like great if you want to be a director or a writer or a producer, but if you want to be in one of the other creative positions, then it's probably not the best place
Mm-hmm.
to
No,
be, and they're
100%.
not cheap to do.
No.
You don't, bet you'd learn more in 2 months on a film set than you'll learn in a year at film school.
Definitely. That being said, there's a lot of things about film schools that are completely worthwhile, depending on what field you're going into.
Right,
But the
exactly.
biggest thing is, and that you gave a fantastic piece of advice that, shut up and listen, because it doesn't matter how much you think you know, you probably don't know anything if you've not been on a set before.
I learn new stuff on sets every single time I'm there.
And so, like, I talked about a little bit about the one film that I worked on. Like, I never PA'd before, so my first couple of days, I wouldn't say I was getting yelled at, but it was a lot of like, "What are you doing? Why are you doing this?" type of thing. Because the thing is, it's kind of a baptism by fire type situation, because film sets are not the place to learn in a lot of respects,
Right.
but a lot of films don't want you unless you have some experience. So you kind of have to catch on quickly. Like, when I started doing that one film, I had no idea that I was going to end up doing anything of art department. I started by grabbing people waters, and then by the end of it, I had to make fake pee. And but like, my big claim to fame is, like, we had to have a character. There's an oar that had a character's name written on it, and they had me write it. So it's like, from now forever, my handwriting is on. So it's like, but if I would have just come in and pretended like I knew what was going on, I wouldn't have gotten that opportunity.
And film crews, experienced film crews, if you come in and you make out that you know everything, it's chum in the water.
Mm-hmm.
We'll mess you up. We will mess,
sense the fear.
but it is, well, it's also, it's like, I know that you don't know that. So why are you saying that you do?
Yeah.
And it's, the classic, it's like, go, get me a spinner or do whatever, all these silly things. It's like getting, sending people off for an F-stop or whatever, I mean, it's like, if you don't know, we can be really, people can be mean, but they'll back, but for me personally, it's like, if somebody is just really, is just a sponge to learn and is eager to just do everything and anything, then that's great. That's how I was. I appreciate that. And also, I mean, I've had people like, I'm like, ask me tomorrow. Right now, I'm in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Step away, not now. But then later at lunch, I might go, okay, this was going on and this is why I was doing it. And, I had really great mentors. I love to share my knowledge. I'm excited watching new people come up. Like I said, it's like, I love, that's part of the directing thing, of having some new people and some, when I did Lancaster Park, I had a costume designer, a young woman who was a costume PA and from France. And she was recommended to me by 3 costume designers. I said, I'm looking for some new, it's not a big job, but I need somebody to do the clothing. And 3 women recommended this young lady. And she was phenomenal. She said, my grandmother took me to see a movie when I was 7, and I loved the clothes so much I realized that's what I wanted to do, and everything I've done since then has been geared towards being a costume designer. She said, I even took a year psychology in college so that I could figure out how I could transfer personality traits into clothing. And I was like, you have the job.
Yeah.
Anybody who has that much passion for something, the girl Catherine Watling, who was the production designer for me on Ready to Go. I mean, I knew exactly how I wanted it to look, and I gave her pictures and references and images and everything. But on the day we were scouting and they were dressing the set, And I kept thinking, I'm going to have to go back and dress that set. I know I'm going to have to go back and, like, you know, they'll have put everything in, but I know I'm going to have to do it. And we got back from scouting, and I walked in, and I sort of looked, and I was like... And I just went up and moved this cup, like, half an inch. Because they'd done even to the extent where in the kitchen, you don't see it, but in the kitchen, in the top corners, they'd taken cobwebs from the stages and put them on sticks and stuck them onto the walls, so there were cobwebs hanging down in the kitchen, you know. And I was just like, they had done such a good job, and it was fantastic. And she was really new. She'd like designed another little short, but she was just somebody who was so excited to do it and so happy to get down and dirty with it. And it looked fantastic. And I'm developing a feature in the UK, and if it happens, I want her to design it because I think she's so good. You know, but then when I did Lancaster Park, same thing. I had this brand new costume designer, but then I had a production designer who's a set decorator friend of mine who's won Emmys and was Oscar nominated. So I had all these different levels of people, but what they all had in common is a passion for the story, you know. And if you have a passion for storytelling and the story, that will come across, and you know you can learn as you go along, like you said. You know, it's good to train with people. It's good to watch and see how people do stuff. But no, I just love it. I love it. I need COVID to be over so I can go shoot something.
I'm in the same boat. I was actually right in the process of doing some... I've never worked with visual effects before, so I was right in the process of doing some visual effects shooting right before it hit. Like it was a Wednesday that they were like, okay, we have to limit rooms of people down to 50 people. And I had a shoot coming on Monday. By Friday, it was down to 10 people. And I was like, oh, I should probably cancel this. But I did have, since I do need to wrap up shortly because my wife is in school and she needs the computer to go to class. But I did have a couple last questions for you. First, you've worked with a lot of directors, a lot of big name filmmakers, being a prop master, and you had mentioned earlier when we were talking that you learned a lot on set working right next to these people. What would you say? And this might be a big question. What would you say the best piece of advice you've learned from another filmmaker is? Watching them work. Watching them work
is to not overthink it. I sort of channeled a couple of people when I started to direct. Alison Anders was one, because she spends a lot of time with the actors prior, just in conversation, talking about who the characters are and who they are, so that when you get there on the day, you kind of let them loose and you're not fixing minutia in there. And the other piece would be really, it's about knowing what to, don't worry if the desk doesn't look quite right, as long as the one thing you're going to insert does look right. And so it was more sort of generally watching and learning those pieces of, like, do all the prep work, not only with your actors but with everything, so that when you're on the day, you can let everybody go and then just see what magic happens, rather than not plan at all. And I've worked with a lot of people who don't plan at all, and that means that you have 150 people standing around. And as a female director, and as an older female director, I absolutely cannot afford to waste a minute of time when they start paying me on set, because I'm already working at a disadvantage according to them, according to the powers that be. So that would really be it, is do the prep work and know what you want to shoot.
And then I think the last question I have for you is, you had mentioned after Ready to Go, your next short, which you finished, is called Lancaster Park. What can you tell me about that?
Okay, so we had talked earlier, Ready to Go did really well. Great on the festivals, won a lot of awards. It got me into the Sony Directors Program, and that got me into a lot of meetings, a lot of general meetings with showrunners and producers for potential television directing. And every single time in the room, they were like, look, your experience is awesome. Your short is awesome, but you have one piece of work. And that's not enough for us to be able to tell whether or not you can do this. So I was then, all right, I need to do something else, and I need to do it longer, even though it will eliminate certain festivals, because I'll be over the 15-minute window of a lot of short film festivals. But I need to do something that's closer to the half-hour drama time frame, which is, and we're, I think, 18 minutes, so we're only a couple of minutes short of that. I needed it to be bigger in expanse. I also wanted to direct women. John wrote the script again. And I said, look, I want to tell a story that I can speak to, so I want a single mum and a teenage daughter. Because I've lived that life, not in a trailer, working at Walmart, but you know, I know that relationship, and I would like to explore that relationship. So that's how, and I'm like, and I love trailers in the desert. So go, write me something. And he came back with, again, I learned a lot. I didn't have to chop anything from Ready to Go, but I chopped a lot from Lancaster Park. And one of the things I've learned in my own, you know, Lynda's directing film school that I've been running myself for 2 years, is that a lot of times there's just too much stuff in a script. And what you need to do is, I told John, I'm like, look, Michelangelo said that when he got the piece of marble, all I had to do is take away all the shit that wasn't David. You know, and I'm like, we just need to take away all the stuff that isn't the story that I want to tell. And there's too much other stuff going on in here. And so I pared down a tremendous amount and ended up with something that I really like. That's quite a simple story, but it's an intense story without having, you know, and I'm like, you don't need other themes going on. The theme of this movie is parental guilt.
Yeah.
You know. So that's how that happened.
That sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing that. Hopefully, once it's done, it'll play somewhere nearby. So I can check it out.
It's in this year's Milwaukee Festival.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah, they selected it, so it's out on its festival run already.
Well, I'm looking forward to seeing it. This has been a really enjoyable conversation for me. I feel like I learned a lot, and I feel like it was really fun to talk with someone who kind of views the filmmaking scape in a different way, but yet similar in some ways. And I really do appreciate all the time you've given me.
Hey, not a problem. Thank you. And hopefully everything recorded all right. And I'll get Bob to get the file and we'll send it to you.
Yeah, perfect. Just send it over to me and keep me in touch about everything that's going on. And I'll send you a link to this when it's done. Thank you.
I will. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
The Shameless Picture Show is recorded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin and Easton, Maryland, is hosted and produced by Nick Richards and Michael Viers, and is more often than not edited by Michael Viers. Any TV or YouTube versions of the show to date have been edited by Nick Richards, Tyler Hanna, or Dina Villani. Our opening theme music was written especially for us by The Directionals, with narration from Zach McLean. The end credit music you're enjoying at the moment was generously provided by my friends in the band 10 Speed, and our new kick-ass logo was designed by Amanda Viers. A special thank you to all of our Patreon supporters and to our generous sponsors at Mill Creek Entertainment and Vinegar Syndrome. We are on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, iTunes, Google Play, and Libsyn. You can find links to all these tremendous folks, as well as the show, in the description below. Make sure to rate, review, and subscribe.